Long Paul, please allow me to read out a question that's typed here in the chat group. Thank you, Long Paul, for this talk on karma. You have said that we are responsible for our karma. The two stories you related seem to suggest that protection they received was possibly not due to themselves, but intervention of others, like the monk in the cave. Can you kindly say something about inherited karma to explain why in a serious car accident or airplane crash, some people manage to survive? Thank you.
Well, in the story I related about the couple who almost got trampled by the elephant, you could say it's the good karma of offering dana to a monk, supporting a good monk who had maybe some special knowledge in his samadhi, who could see the danger coming the next day and so warn them to get out of their house, but without telling them why, but just warn them to be up in the cave. So it is their own good karma in the sense they're supporting Sangha and then getting a very pertinent, a very useful teaching at the right moment. And the man has shot the elephant before, which is why the elephant's seeking revenge. So of course that is some bad karma which will follow him, but maybe it's just the good karma of knowing the monk, helping the monk, keeps the bad karma from giving fruition at the moment so they can carry on with their lives practicing. Karma is a bit like that. There's supportive factors which lead to the ripening of good and bad karma. So good karma that you make is providing good supportive conditions which, when bad karma comes to fruition, maybe helps you to get through it quicker, easier, minimizes it, reduces it, or maybe it just can't give its full result yet because you're making good karma. And that's like what's arising and manifesting first. So it keeps you ahead of the bad karma. It doesn't get rid of the bad karma, but it just keeps you ahead. Similarly, when we get lost in life, we stop keeping the precepts, or we do some particularly unskillful things, it tends to be a downward spiral, and maybe good karmic causes and results that could have been manifesting don't, because we're making so much bad karma at that time, and maybe other bad karma that normally wouldn't be coming up is suddenly coming up. Because karma is, a whole range of different conditions and factors are working together. And number one is what our intention is and how we're leading our life at that moment, but also stuff from the past, like you say, inherited karma. So if you want, fast track to getting your good karma coming up and developing stronger karma, as I say, stay close to Sangha, because they tend to give you the best example and they're the fertile ground for cultivation and making merit. Whereas if you go the other way and you spend a lot of time with people who don't have much right view, don't keep sila, not very generous, maybe more aggressive or more selfish, then that tends to lead you in a different direction, doesn't it? And you see that all the time in life. Who do people take as their guides, as their leaders? And then if you pick the wrong people, it can lead to disaster. And you believe someone who doesn't have precepts or an understanding of morality, say, well, they often lead you into disaster, don't they? So sticking close to people who already understand what good and bad karma is and act accordingly and try to develop good karma, that's a very powerful supportive condition in your life. It won't stop bad karma coming up sometimes, you just can't avoid it, but like you say, sometimes some people are in a situation where it could go either way, life or death, but because of their good karma, their good state of mind, maybe they're well prepared, so when the bad karma comes to fruition, they manage to get through it, get out of it somehow, because the right supportive factors for their good karma help them at that moment. So practicing sila is one of the most powerful conditioning factors that will help protect you at a time where unplanned unpleasant, unfortunate, bad karma is manifesting. You're meeting with misfortune, but it helps you stay out of it. So maybe like when you meet someone who's very aggressive and they maybe are threatening you, and they could, if you put a foot wrong, say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, arouse their anger to the point where they may physically hurt you, say, for example, but you manage to keep your precepts because you've already been practicing that and you have an awareness of good and bad karma, and you don't want to make bad karma or be aggressive, so you're patient, you watch what you say, you watch what you do, you're careful, you're not heedless, you're heedful, or maybe the situation passes without too much incident or too much harm. So another story I often tell about is the two monks doing the walk through Northern California to San Francisco, disciples of Master Hua, who are doing this walk they call 3 steps, 1 bow, when they walk along the road on a kind of pilgrimage to a monastery, and every 3 steps they stop and take 1 bow. And this is like 35 years ago in North America, so monks were not very well known and not very common sight on the road, so they got quite a lot of abuse shouted at them. People threw beer cans at them and things, but they just patiently carried on with their walk, and they were keeping their precepts, not harming anyone, not responding with anger. So over and over again, nothing happened to them, even though they met some aggressive people. Even one time they were going through one neighborhood and they stopped at the red lights, waiting to cross the road, and a whole gang of bikers pulled up next to them on the road, driving their big motorbikes, and these are big guys and a lot of them, and they just stopped. Seeing the monks, they weren't sure what the monks were, and they were curious, so they stopped their bikes in the middle of the road, just left them there at the red light, and all walked over and surrounded the 2 monks. So, if the monks had been arrogant or aggressive at that moment, they could well have ended up with a bloody nose or something. But the bikers surrounded them, and one of the monks was quite a short fellow, so the lead biker was huge. He wanted to talk to the monk, so he picked him up, grabbed him and picked him up so that they were eye to eye, so literally his feet are off the ground. And he said, "What are you?" quite gruffly. And the monk, who is doing his metta meditation, he's consciously practicing metta, compassion, he says, "I'm a Buddhist monk." And the biker thinks for a few moments. Buddhist monk. Says, "I have known a lot of religious people in my life, and I don't like them." Says, "I've known a lot of Christians, and I don't like them. I've known a lot of Jews, and I don't like them. I've known a lot of Muslims, and I don't like them. But Buddhists, you're all right." So he put the monk down, and he put his hand in his pocket, and the monk was wondering, is he still angry or upset? Is he going to pull out a weapon? And he pulled out a $20 bill and gave him a donation. And then they went on their way happily. So there was no disaster, no aggression, no one was hurt, and they actually got a donation. So that's the power of metta. If you're consciously developing metta, well, maybe it can help somebody who could potentially hurt you calm down. At least you're not provoking them, so there's less reason for them to hurt you. Maybe it can even win them over so they actually become more friendly and talk to you. And if you ask any monk, they'll have had a situation like that with animals or with people in difficult situations where there's poor communication or they're just aggressive people. Practicing non-violence, practicing metta, being mindful, being careful at that moment can maybe save them from injury or whatever. You'll see that over and over again. And that's meeting misfortune with good karma, and it maybe can get you out of trouble or at least minimize the trouble. Or in the same way, with illness. You get ill, but you have faith, you're practicing, and you seem to get through your illness better than someone who's stressed by it, and maybe the stress makes the whole experience worse. there's so many experiences and examples of this, but hopefully you can understand the principle at work here.
Sadhu Bhante. Just earlier on, you mentioned about metta. So there is a similar question here, and this is with relation to the metta chant. And there is a line that says, one unburdened with duties, and as lay people, there are family duties and responsibilities, and it can be quite burdensome and exhausting. So this person asking the question is, can Bhante give some tips with regards to practice on unburdening duties?
Well, with wise reflection, we have to reflect on what are our duties and what are the boundaries and the limits. Because the unfortunate thing with delusion and attachment is we often go beyond the limits of our duties and responsibilities. We take on more responsibility than we need to, or we get over-attached, and we suffer, don't we? Because of those duties. We're not unburdened with duties, they start to burden, become a heavy burden. So the Buddha isn't saying you shouldn't have any duties or responsibilities in life, but he's saying you have to look at your attitude and know your limits and know what is your duty and what is not. So, we, particularly with families, parents, children, brothers, sisters, husbands, wives, often the burden is there and we make it worse than it needs to be, because we are forgetting that everyone has their own karma and we don't own those people. We're related to them and we have an important relationship with them, but we don't absolutely own them, even our children. We have a duty to teach them, love them, care for them, but we have to also be looking at the mental states, the state of mind we have as we're doing that, and how over anxious we can become, how burdened we can become because of our attachment. We're lacking mindfulness and clarity sometimes, so we worry unnecessarily. We get angry because of our attachment and because of our sense of responsibility. We can get angry, can't we? When they don't do what we want and we're not sure what's going to happen, or we're afraid for them or worried about them, we can get angry. And you have to admit, being angry is not a wholesome state of mind. It's a negative kind of karma that we have to practice to recognize and let go of. So when we're burdened, the more burdens we take on, the more tendency to get angry, say, for example. Or how, sometimes because of our duties and responsibilities, sometimes we fail to adapt to changing situations. So a good example is, say, mother loves her son or daughter as they're growing up, and then when they leave home, still loves son and daughter and can't bear them to leave home, still very clingy, protective, anxious about them, worried about them, possessive. Then maybe they go and get married to someone and they almost see the new husband or wife, the new partner of their own son and daughter, as competition. And the burden of duty and responsibility goes to the point where they're still possessive and they get so angry that their new partner isn't right for them, or they're not up to scratch, or they're competing with them for the love of this son or daughter that they brought up. We don't know our limits, and delusion comes into the equation, doesn't it? So someone was telling me a story about one mother-in-law competing with her daughter-in-law for the love of her son, or the husband of the daughter-in-law, and the son maybe being a little bit too indulgent, having two women fighting and competing over him. He's enjoying it, had a very good time. The mum's trying to spoil him, the wife is trying to spoil him, and perhaps he was a little too passive in that situation. But anyway, one thing that happened was he kept saying, there's this food I really like, my mum makes. And so the daughter-in-law, his wife, said, I'm going to make it for you. And so she goes to the mother-in-law to get the recipe, and mother-in-law gives the recipe but misses out two important ingredients, because she doesn't want the daughter-in-law to be able to cook as well as her, in case the son likes the daughter-in-law's cooking more. So she misses out two vital ingredients. So the daughter-in-law cooks up the dish trying to impress and keep the husband happy, and he gets it and it's not as good as the way mum makes it. And so on it goes. There is a time to attach, there's a time to let go, there's a time to unburden. Once your son or daughter gets married or is an adult living out there, they're mature adult, you're still there for them, but it's time to let go a bit, isn't it? And let them get on with it. Certainly not to compete with their partner and end up in some kind of battle worthy of a soap opera. But we do this all the time, don't we, with our relationships? We take on more than we need to, we overburden ourselves, we get worried, we get attached, we even get greedy and angry. So this is all something that you start to reveal, particularly through the practice of mindfulness and investigation of your own suffering and your own attachments. And sometimes we have to learn very painful lessons and learn how to let go when it's appropriate.
Sadhu Lampo. I'd like to invite Sister Kanti. I think she's been waiting for a while now. Sister Kanti, could you unmute yourself and ask a question?
Thank you, Long Po, for the Dhamma talk. Good evening, Long Po. This morning, during my formal sitting, sometimes I see the beginning of the thought, the middle, and the ending. And then at other times, only see the middle and the end of the thought. And further on, sometimes just the ending of the thought. However, suddenly there is this recurring thoughts that arises. And these recurring thoughts can see the wanting of things to happen the way I expected it to be. And then, but it's not happening that way. Then the attachment to this strong sense of I, the sense of self, and arise. And then there this becoming of anxiety. Anxiety arose. And then the mind starts to cut off the thought immediately and not wanting it to proliferate. So then observe the vibration at the back of the head, and then after that mindfulness gradually sees the vibration pass away gradually, and then calmness arrives. So may Long Po provide guidance as to what I'm seeing is correct. Sadhu, 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 thank you, Long Po.
Well, I think you already know to a certain extent what's going on. You've got craving arising, stimulated by memories and feelings coming up, and then the trains of thought take over the mind because mindfulness is not strong enough to cut them off yet. And the Buddha said, craving knows no limits, knows no end, it's never satisfied. So as long as our mindfulness is a little bit on the weak side, then our wisdom and understanding will also be weak. And so we often do get recurring thought patterns and different emotional states and moods coming up often over and over again. So we got enough awareness just to recognize them coming up and say, oh, I've seen that before, but not enough yet to stop them or completely let go of them. So a lot of our practice is very frustrating, seeing different mental defilements, different kinds of craving arising that we've seen before. And, we can say, oh, it's hopeless, I'm never going to be able to get beyond this or let go of this. But you have to be careful because that's another kind of craving, isn't it? The disappointment in the practice, disappointment in our efforts and ourselves as we practice. We have to keep being willing to come back to establishing mindfulness. And the more mindfulness and awareness we have, the more our wisdom can function. It allows wisdom to really see what's going on, and particularly to see the pain and suffering of holding on to negative reactions to things and negative perceptions, negative beliefs that are stimulating more suffering and confusing us more, causing more anxiety. wisdom, when backed by strong mindfulness, can say, oh, this is suffering, this is to be abandoned. And we know, like knowing fire and knowing water, we know this is something that's going to hurt us, it's time to let it go. And our mind agrees eventually. If mindfulness and wisdom are strong enough, clear enough, the mind will agree to let go and it will just stop. Enough, don't need to think this anymore. So it's a maturing of mindfulness and insight. And we just have to keep practicing with sincerity until we can do it.
Sadhu Lumpur. There are no more questions from the floor, Lumpur. I think we're good for this evening, Lumpur.
So that's it. Sorry, I missed that.
Yes, and there are no more questions from the floor, Lumpur. So we're good for this evening.
Okay. So very happy to be talking with you tonight. And we wish you all good health and safety at this time, peaceful minds, healthy bodies, and safety and success in what you're doing. And we'll pay respects to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha now and finish the meeting.